What's up, Cougars? So today I need your help. I have a really important question for you guys. And to me, it's something that will drastically change and have impact on the future of BYU football. Before I get to the question, I want to make sure that we're on the same page. Many of you know this, but earlier in the month, the Power Four leagues met to discuss expanding the college football playoffs. The college football playoff is currently just 12 games. And I know there's a lot of controversy about what the right number of games is for the playoffs. Everyone has their own opinion on that. But we don't necessarily need to even get into that today because we're going to talk about something way more important than the number of games. Really quickly, I will point this out. NIL has completely changed the game in college football. It's made the top 25 far more competitive than it has ever been before. I think Indiana winning a national title is evidence of that. A few years ago, if you had asked me if it was possible for a team outside the top 12 to win a national title, I'd have said, heck no. And there would have been many years, if not every year, that would have been correct. But what we just saw last year is proof of how much things have changed. For example, the Miami Hurricanes made it to the championship game and played a very competitive game against Indiana, and they were this close to getting left out. They very likely would have been left out of the playoffs if Virginia had won the ACC championship game. And then you had a two-loss Notre Dame team who lost two very close games with a redshirt freshman quarterback in their first two games of the season, and then they went on to win their next 10. They got better and better throughout the season and would have been very competitive in the playoffs, in my opinion. And BYU could have easily gone on a run too. So NIL has definitely made things a lot more competitive, which in my opinion is great for college football. I'd rather see a sport where any team can rise up and win a national title versus only 3 or 4 teams like the past. So back to the critical question that I have for you guys. So because of this new, more competitively balance of teams scenario that we face, the Power Four leagues met to discuss expanding the CFP. And there are two competing plans that have emerged from these discussions. One was the SEC plan, and the other was the Big Ten plan. And there's a lot of details in these two plans, but we're not going to get into all those details just yet because I think those details really muddy the water. They confuse the situation. So the SEC plan is for every conference to have one automatic qualifier. The automatic qualifier would be the conference champion. The Big Ten plan is for every conference to have 4 automatic qualifiers. Those 4 would be the best 4 teams in the conference. So here's the question for you guys. Would you support one team being guaranteed in per conference, or would you support 4 teams being guaranteed per conference? Before you answer, let's get into a few more details. This question at face value seems really obvious to me. You guys see what I'm wearing. You know what's on the back wall. As an FSU fan, just a few years ago, I watched as my undefeated Florida State Seminoles got left out of the top 4 and had their chances for a national title stolen from them, which I'll tell you, I don't wish that on you. It's one of the worst feelings that any fan can go through. But there's a reason this happened, and the reason was because ESPN values the SEC more than it values the ACC. Because ESPN is a lot richer because of the SEC, because the SEC makes them a lot more money. So ESPN started spewing SEC propaganda about Alabama jumping an undefeated FSU team, and they basically rigged the committee vote. And this past year, we saw them do the same exact thing again, getting an undeserving Alabama team in over Notre Dame or BYU. So I mention all this because I think it's very important context for the question I asked you earlier. If a conference only has one team guaranteed to get in my opinion, they open the door for ESPN to greatly influence the committee more. And they're going to try and get as many SEC teams in as possible because it makes them more money. If a conference has 4 teams guaranteed to get in my opinion, it greatly reduces the amount that ESPN can influence the committee. So to me, with the evidence that I pointed out earlier that ESPN is already stacking the deck, it makes way more sense that the Big 12 would prefer to have 4 automatic qualifiers as opposed to 1. Which brings us back to the question I asked you earlier. What do you guys think? Do you support one team being guaranteed in per conference, or do you support 4 teams being guaranteed per conference? But hold on one more second before you answer. Right now, the Big 12's commissioner, Brett Yormark, is in favor of the SEC proposal. which means he's in favor of only having one team being guaranteed per conference and letting the rest be selected by the committee. A committee that is so corrupt at times that it left out an undefeated team just a few years ago. Now, I'm not sure fully that I understand Brett's position on this. Let's be clear. The SEC and the Big Ten consider themselves as the best two conferences, and they don't really think that the Big 12 and the ACC are in the competition at all, despite how close Miami just got to winning a national title, despite the Big 12 being in the national championship game more recently than the SEC. And they might have had a point a few years ago, prior to NIL really taking hold. But my entire argument is that NIL has changed things, and NIL has balanced the competition. And now any team from any league can rise to the top. Again, remember Indiana. So I can't tell you exactly what Yormark is thinking here. But if I'm the commissioner of the Big 12, there's no doubt I'm strongly advocating for whatever allows me to not have to play politics and not have to depend on a committee and not have to fight ESPN's SEC propaganda or the Fox's Big Ten propaganda. Now, in all fairness, there's another important detail that we need to talk about, which may have something to do with Brett Yormark supporting the SEC's plan over the Big Ten's plan. That is, in the SEC's plan, the conference championship games still happen like they always have. And in the Big Ten's plan, the conference championship games would no longer happen. So when we look at the Big Ten's plan, on the weekend where you normally have conference championship games, instead of those, you would have the first round of the playoffs. And that first round would be play-in games for each conference, where the winner advanced in the playoffs and the loser was eliminated. Now, I already know some of you would be against eliminating the conference championship games. But there are two incredibly valid reasons the Big Ten is pushing to eliminate them. The first is, when they expand the playoffs to more games, both teams going to the conference championship game are going to be guaranteed a playoff spot. So these conference championship games greatly lose meaning because the loser is still going to the playoff. The second is, there's a very real risk you see teams playing each other 3 times in a year. For instance, you could see a scenario where BYU played Texas Tech during the year, played them again in the conference championship game, and then turned around and played them again in the playoffs. The problem with that is viewers typically lose interest in watching the more often two teams play each other. So the Big Ten believes that people would be more likely to watch the first round of the playoffs if they were on that conference championship weekend. And they would be more likely to watch a playoff elimination game as opposed to the current conference championship games, where both teams are going to the playoffs no matter what. And I don't think they're wrong about this. The college football playoff numbers do strongly suggest more people are watching the playoffs than are watching the conference championship games. This brings us back to the question I asked you earlier. Do you support one team being guaranteed in the conference, and would you rather keep conference championship games? Or do you support 4 teams being guaranteed per conference, and would you rather not keep the conference championship? These are the two options on the table. To me, this all comes down to whether you value the conference championship game over the 4 guaranteed spots. And if I'm the Big 12 commissioner, there's no way I'd value a meaningless conference championship game, especially not above those 4 guaranteed spots. I think I'd give the conference championship to the team who had the fewest number of losses, finished with the best regular season record, and go from there. Or if 2 teams had the same number of losses, the team who won head-to-head, whatever tiebreaker you want to use there. And if they didn't play head-to-head, I'd give it to the team who made it furthest in the playoffs and kept the score the closest. There's a ton of ways you could do this. Let me know your thoughts. Thank you guys for watching today. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment and telling us whether you support 1 team being guaranteed in per conference or 4 teams being guaranteed per conference, do that in the comments right now. Let me know your thoughts. We'll see you on the next one.